and welcome to the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. I'm your host, Sue Curver, and on today's show, I'm sitting down with Doreen Bender Johnson, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, a mother of two, and a woman who's leaving a legacy of hope and healing by offering simple words of encouragement, promise, and praise. Doreen, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, Sue. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So I want to start today's show by talking about your time in the U.S. Marines. You said that you entered the service at 21 years of age, at a time when I would imagine it was difficult to be a female in the military. What led you to make that life choice, and why did you choose the Marine Corps?
So my mom used to tell me all the time that I was her most unique child, and that Dodo, as my mom would call me, she goes, "My Dodo will do absolutely anything." I believe those words really built who I am. I believed that I was her most unique child, and I believed that I would do anything. So when I got my first real job at the bank, I was a bank teller, and the bank back then had big windows that you could see out onto the main street. In the little city that I grew up in, Canton, Ohio, our bank was right on Tuscarora Street. It was one of the main thoroughfares. It was 1 block away from the military recruiting depot. As I stood in my cube looking out that window, probably 2 or 3 times a week, a very tall, dark, handsome man would come strutting across the street from one corner to the next corner and then up the walkway into my bank, dressed in the famous Marine Corps uniform. I was oblivious to it, didn't know what a Marine was. And he came in and shined those beautiful white teeth, and boy, he looked handsome to me. I didn't know he was a recruiter though. And he asked me, would I be interested in going to the Marine Corps? And I looked at him like, what's a Marine Corps? I was a little green. He commenced to telling me that, it's part of like the Army. Well, my dad was in the Army. I understood that much. All I knew, Sue, is that if there were more of him, wherever that Marine Corps was, I was willing to go there. And so I signed up for that reason. That's what got me interested. When I went and spoke with him, he goes, I'm going to recruit you. You're going into the Marine Corps. And so I went home and told people I'm going into the Marine Corps. And everyone that I told obviously knew what the Marine Corps was. And then they laughed. You're a little woman. And at the time I was 5 feet 3 inches tall. I weighed just barely over 100 pounds or so. And they would all tell me, you can't go into the Marine Corps. That's the toughest branch of the service. And the more people told me I couldn't do it, the more resolute I became to doing it.
What was boot camp like for you?
My dad had passed away just about 1.5 years before that. My mom really didn't have a lot of information or advice for me. So I really didn't have anyone around me to give me any advice to prepare me for where I was going. I showed up in a blue jean denim mini skirt and black suede pumps with rainbow stripes on the heels. And I went parading into Camp Lejeune, South Carolina, dressed like I was ready to go to a party. When those drill sergeants got a gander at me, it was on for the rest of the night. It was a horrible, frightening experience. For all of you who've been in the military, I'm sure every branch has something similar where they huddle you all together in a room, and they're yelling, they're screaming, there's disarray going on and lots of confusion. It was dark. We were in a gymnasium, and we were sit down on the floor and then cross your legs. And so I would cross my legs Indian style. As one drill sergeant would come along and say, you cross your legs Indian style. Who do you think you are? I had on a skirt. Remember? A mini skirt. The next one would come around and goes, what kind of woman are you? I cross your legs. I muddled through that very first night, horrified, shaking like a chihuahua, if you can imagine a little chihuahua. Marine Corps boot camp horrified me every night. I cried. I think I cried up until the week before graduation because I hated what was going on. And little did I know, those tears were truly purging the weaknesses and the insecurities right out of my body. And I had a special drill sergeant, Sergeant Gripper, and she was a little short African American lady. She scowled at me just like she wanted to rip my head off. She stayed on me. She was one of my permanent drill instructors, and she stayed on me. I didn't know that at that time she wanted me to be her honor grad, which I didn't get to be, but she was hounding me and dogging me for a reason. If I could ever find Sergeant Gripper, I would tell her thank you now.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's such an interesting point because here you are, a female that has just entered the Marine
Yeah.
Corps. And you just mentioned that the drill sergeant who was on you and who had it out for you was also, much like yourself, a petite woman of color. Did you feel that there was a lot of adversity against you? And if so, how did you overcome that adversity?
At that moment in time, I didn't. I grew up in Canton, Ohio. Although my neighborhood was relatively diverse, Canton, Ohio is not. It was the culture that I grew up in that I had become oblivious to the minor slights that I received as a young Black woman because they've happened all of my life. So I didn't know any different. They happened to my mother. And she never made any big deal about it. She never talked about it. Race was never ever discussed in our household. I didn't become aware of real racial animosity until I left home. Our home was such a safe environment. We were sheltered from so much that when I left and finally got to the Marine Corps as a young adult, the world to me was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I mean, I'd never heard of so many crazy things. So, Sergeant Gripper, her treatment of me, now I see was to be to my benefit. But at that moment in time, her treatment felt the same as all the rest of the drill sergeant's treatment. I felt singled out, but not singled out. I didn't feel like she treated me more poorly than she treated others. I was just trying to stay alive because I thought I was going to die there. I didn't think about it in terms of race. That didn't come until much, much later on when I got into the Fleet Marine Force.
And that was going to be my next question, Dorian, is how was it after you got out of the shelter of boot camp and into the fleet?
My career was short lived because I got pregnant and then I separated from active duty to go to the reserves. But while I was on active duty, I was in a male dominated MOS or rate. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a lot about my MOS. Again, I was pretty young. I was not quite 20, 22. And because I was so naive, a lot of things passed me by. I was oblivious to a lot of what went on, with the exception of a young lieutenant who clearly did not care for me at all. I never knew why. Now I know why. But at that moment in time, it didn't dawn on me. Again, racial slights were something that I grew up with. It was a normal thing for me. And now that I think about some of the things that he would say, I didn't give it much thought in that moment of time. But at one particular day, I don't know what it is that I had done, but he saw fit to berate me all the way to the ground until I was bawling. And there was a young warrant officer, so he ranked below the first lieutenant. He had an accent, so I'm sure he was of African descent. I could see the pain in his eyes having to watch it. It strikes emotion for me now because I know what it is. And for him to have to witness it and not be able to do anything about it, causes me pain thinking about him because at that moment in time, he saw the pain for me. Well, little did he know. Sometimes they say ignorance is bliss. As soon as I left that office, I wiped my eyes and I moved on. I moved on. And so I stayed cleared of him. And I had a top, my master gunnery sergeant, my top, who was in his office, I'm sure, having to witness everything audibly, kind of took me under his wing after that. So he kept me out of that lieutenant's way.
Doreen, that's a very powerful story. And I think one that really illustrates how your experience in the Marine Corps gave you a broader perspective and undoubtedly gave you a sense of responsibility. So, how did all of this inform your life choices as you moved past the Marine Corps and back into civilian life?
I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have been able to go to the Corps. I tell everyone that going to the Marine Corps saved my life. Not that I was on some path to destruction. I don't know that it was in me to do bad things. I wasn't like a tough girl or a bad girl or a girl from the streets. That wasn't who I was brought up to be, and it just wasn't who I was. Having gone through the Marine Corps allowed me to understand that I could take charge of my life and gave me the tools to be able to do so. It gave me discipline as I ran those miles. The first time I did it, I thought, oh, you're trying to kill me. I'm going to die. I can't do this. And then by the end, I knew that I could. I'll tell you, I never stopped running after that. I ran for the rest of my adult life. That discipline followed me through my jobs. It really did give me some direction and helped me focus on this is what I need to do. And now get your steps and follow the process to get there. Without that, I don't know that I would have accomplished being able to just, take care of myself. It's what helped me become an adult.
Let's talk a little bit about direction because earlier in the show, you shared that you had lost your father at a young age. And in that, you lost your guiding light. How did
Yeah.
you find that light again, especially in these last few years?
You're right. My dad was my guiding light. When I was, maybe 13, 14 years old, kind of a primpy kind of little girl, I was always putting on the lipstick and the eyeliners. And I was primping one day in a mirror that was hung between two windows that looked out into our backyard. I loved the mirror when I was a kid. So I got there and I'm primping, and my dad's desk was right to the left of that window where he would come in every single day from work and sit back at that desk and ponder life, I would imagine. And one day, as I'm primping, I don't know how the conversation came up. I must have made some reference to wanting to do something or not wanting to do something. And it was likely school. And my father told me at that time, you know what, Dodo? No one makes you do anything. You don't have to do anything. Once you become an adult, you're going to understand that everything you do is a choice. Now, you can choose to go to school and get good grades or not. You can choose to be successful. You can choose to be a bum. No one will stop you, but be ready to accept those consequences. Those consequences are your choice. My dad was a man of very few words. So he was like E.F. Hutton. And when E.F. Hutton spoke, people listened. When my dad spoke, I listened because he never talked. And those words stuck with me. They were a beacon for me. And I got to a point, Sue, after my divorce, when I was by myself, feeling the weight of life, because for the first time, I am actually doing this all by myself. My dad's words were there for me. And that's how I pulled myself together. His words The Marine Corps discipline allowed me to go, get yourself together, honey. You got things to do, and crying is not going to help any of us. So I made a choice.
And part of the choices that you've made is your ability to employ compassion. What does this actually look like for you? And why is it so important to you to show compassion?
It's innately who I am. I have 5 siblings, all girls, and a younger, I call him a brother, but he's really my nephew. My older sister had a son when she was very young, and my mom and dad raised him until my dad passed away. So he's more like a brother. When we were young kids, my siblings used to kind of laugh and kind of make fun, not cruel, but make fun because they thought Dodo is the nicest one. She's always doing something kind for somebody else, even at her own expense. When we were kids, we went roller skating. The school would give us a, like, put us all on a bus and take us out to the roller skating rink. We go to the skating rink and all the kids are skating, and my one sister, Kathy, and I were 11 months apart. So we're close in age and close in grade. She was there, but she was out on the floor. And there was a boy, much older boy, probably seventh grade or eighth grade. He convinced me that he would like to skate and wanted to borrow my roller skates. And he says he didn't have money to buy skates. And I felt badly that he couldn't skate. And so I gave him my roller skates that I paid 50 cents for. And my sister Kathy came over and she goes, Dodo, where are your roller skates? And I go, I gave them to that boy right there. And Kathy, she had her dukes up. She was always ready to fight. And she goes out there, she goes, hey, boy, what you doing with my sister's skates? Give them back. And she'll never let me forget the fact that this boy conned me out of my roller skates at the roller rink. It was because my heart felt for him. So that's followed me all of my life. I can't stand to see anyone mistreated, least of all people who can't protect and stick up for themselves. And as I grew older, I really learned that it's our compassion and our love for others that really give us our joy. I started volunteering at like soup kitchens to dish out food, give away food, and serve people. And the one holiday that I did that, that was the best holiday of my life. I'll never forget it. I missed the whole holiday being at home because I was at that soup kitchen. But to meet so many people who genuinely appreciated someone caring just really touched my heart. And so I made it a point to make sure that my children experienced that. As they got older, I would take them to these, I hate to call them soup kitchens, but we could feed people. I think we need to understand how great our lives are. I didn't grow up with anything. I didn't have any special, I mean, we did have a house. We weren't wealthy by any means. We were paycheck to paycheck people, but I did glean enough information to understand that for as little as I have, there are people with so much less. And who am I to not give of what I have? You can be there for them. Sometimes they just want you to talk. Let people know that they're alive, that they matter.
As you say, sometimes we matter to people we don't even know and in ways that we may never know. So you just talked about this beautiful illustration of taking your holiday and your children and serving others. Do you have any other stories or any other examples of a time when this idea of mattering to people that you don't know was your truth? And what impact has that made?
The closest I've come to a career is, the 15 years of sales that I've had as a sales manager, but I've not really had, the professional career. And I was actually a recruiter at a college, a small college in Virginia. My cube sat right in front of the department manager's office. One day, he comes out of his office and he goes, Doreen, You're always talking. I don't know what to do. You are always talking to someone. And I go, have you ever seen me outside of my queue? And he stopped. I go, have you ever seen me walking around inviting people into my queue? He goes, no, you're always here, but there's always someone over here in your queue. I go, how do they get here? I don't call these people into my queue. I don't know why they come to my queue. I'm trying to work. All I know is that daily there are any number of people who feel the need to come over here and sit in this queue to tell me their private, their intimate, their personal affairs. I don't know why, Scott. Shortly thereafter, I thought about that conversation that I had with him because now my boss has an issue with me. What I came to on my own is that I don't go seeking these things. And quite frankly, I don't want to know any personal business about someone else's life. I don't want to take on someone else's burden. But my heart says, who are you to not just take the time to listen? I believe our lives are not our own. We're not here just for ourselves. I've always thought that our interactions with others are for a reason. And sometimes that reason that you're encountering someone isn't for your benefit. We don't know what's going on in someone else's lives. If I can help you by just listening to your story, is that too much?
So you've mentioned your kids a couple of times. They're grown
Yes.
kids. You've clearly given them an amazing amount of beautiful life lessons. What are the best gifts that they have offered you?
If something were to happen to me today, I think my greatest gift that they've given me is the security in knowing that they're going to be okay. This life, as tricky as it can be cruel, it can be punishing, it can be tough. They're tough enough to take it, and they can take it with grace. When I see them give back to others, that's a blessing for me, that they're not hardened by our society and by the trials that they've gone through. The love that I gave to them, that I see them giving it outside of themselves, making the sacrifices outside of themselves. And sometimes, those things don't come with fanfare, they don't come with rewards. When we're gone, you left an impact, a positive impact on someone. When I'm expired, the people who trifle through, who come through, says, she made my life so much better. She was the kindest person I've ever met. She helped me through the hardest time in my life. That's my reward. People meet my daughter. The first thing they tell me is she is the kindest person. I so appreciate her. She's got a special love and affection for the elderly, and she works with elderly people who have diabetes. They have ailments and things that don't allow them to have good circulation. She works in a podiatrist office. She does medical pedicures. There's a lady right around the corner who lives for me. She was my neighbor. I didn't know. And my neighbor goes, oh my God, I met your daughter. And I go, you did? She goes, yes, she does my mom's pedicures. My mom just loves her. That's my gift right there.
So, Doreen, you have two amazing kids. You've just told us about them. And as you mentioned previously in the podcast, you're now 64 years old and into your second half. You have just gotten married to a wonderful man, and you're experiencing all sorts of exciting things like traveling and dancing. What advice would you give to women who are in this second chapter regarding finding love again, whether that's in a relationship with self, in a relationship with someone else, or finding a relationship with a new activity?
So don't age me too much, Sue. I was born in 64, so I'm turning 60 this year. We're always changing. Every step in our lives, we're evolving, we're recreating ourselves with every passing year. And I met the most amazing man. He's definitely my person. When I met him, we met dancing. I was married for 21 years to my children's father. We grew apart. I got a divorce, 10 years. I had to remake myself. Now I have to become this person at 40 something, and I'm single. And then at 50 something, I had to get used to the idea that you're not that young girl anymore, but I wanted to dance. And I've always wanted to dance. Ballroom dance. Do you all remember when the ballroom came out on TV? I was glued to that television. I go, "Oh my God, wouldn't I love to do that?" I had an opportunity when I first moved from Ohio to Virginia back in the late 90s. I met a guy who taught ballroom dance here in Norfolk. But because I had a young family, I never had the time to do it. But I kept up with him. And fast forward, now my children are adults. I'm now divorced and I've got time on my hands. I'm going to finally do that ballroom dancing. I contacted the gentleman and he told me, "I don't teach anymore, but I do have a woman that I think you're going to love." And he introduced me to the woman who taught me to dance. She was a phenomenal teacher. I went to her class to learn what is sort of like a swing dance. It's called Chicago Step. And in her class, she had women on one side and the men on the other, and there's all the gentlemen there. And from week to week, we get to dance with each other and practice with one another. There was a guy who was there sometimes and sometimes not. When he was there, he was fixated on never wanting to follow the rules and dance with other people. We're supposed to switch partners. And I'm like, what's up with this guy? I talked to him at one of our dance affairs, and I thought that was a nice conversation with him. He's really open. He likes to talk. I appreciate that. So I talked back. The next time we get to another event, we talk a little more. And then sometimes he shows up to class and we talk a little more. He asked me out on a date to a Navy affair because he is a Navy contractor. He buttered me up by saying, "It's a formal affair. We'll get to dress up. There will be food there. There will be wine there, and we may get to dance." Ding, 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 ding. We may get to dance. I'll go with you. I went out with him that evening to his affair. We didn't get to dance, but we did spend the rest of the evening talking. And I don't think we've been apart more than a day since then. He became my guy. So I would say, follow your heart, follow your passions. That's where love is, whatever kind of love it is. I believe that when you're following what's in your heart, what your gut is telling you to do, you should do that. And my heart was telling me I need to dance. And sure enough, he didn't love to dance, but he was there, and that's where I found him. So for anybody who's out there, especially at my age, we've been together now 6 years, so we met in our mid 50s, and now we're married. Blended families can be hard, but when it's the right person, I think you'll enjoy it.
Is there anything that's on your bucket list that you wanna do or learn or experience?
In my spare time, I'm picking up an instrument. I've always wanted to play piano and guitar. Over Christmas, I bought guitars for Carl and I. So we're going to start taking music lessons to just open up our exposure to other groups, to other people. We're having so much fun in the dance community. We're meeting a lot of people. It's giving us that motivation to continue that. That's my hobby. But my passion is to connect with a group to provide a listening ear. There are so many people out there today. I was looking at the statistics that there are not enough therapists because people are suffering with so much trauma and anxiety and depression all over the country for a variety of reasons. Is an interesting phenomenon. I am not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, but I do want to continue to be that person that could bridge that gap. If you just need someone to talk to, then we're just here to talk. And so I'm making those connections. I'm networking now to make those professional connections to get people the help that they need. We're not too busy for each other. Marianne Williamson quoted, "Your playing small does not save the world." When I heard that, I go, that's interesting. Your playing small does not serve the world. She believes that there's nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people feel secure around you. We are all meant to shine, she said. In our own way, we're all meant to shine. We were born to manifest the glory within us. I paraphrased her quote a bit, but that's the way it strikes me. You don't need to have a title to make a difference to people. I think in our own way, we're all great. I might not be great to you, but for the person behind you, I might be everything. And it's not for our own glorification, but the glorification of all of us. Go be great. Go share your greatness with somebody else. Help them be great. That's where I'm at now, networking and pulling people together, connecting people together so that we can all be good together.
Well, thank you, Doreen, for joining us today and for reminding us that we all matter and that together we're all great. I am so grateful that you chose to say yes to this conversation
Oh,
because I know that your words will bless so many. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Be sure to share Doreen's words of wisdom with someone that you know who could use her counsel. And then join me again next Friday for another amazing woman and another episode of Two Gals and a Mic. I'll see you then.